Everybody, this is Dr. Jenny Byrne. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the art of virtual, and today I'm going to focus on running a successful web-based meeting. So in my current job, I've had to learn how to run web meetings with different numbers of people, and I will tell you there have been a lot of bumps along the way. I've learned a lot of good things, and so I wanted to share some of that with you today. So if you're a leader and you're starting to lead meetings, here are a couple of things I really recommend. First of all, get comfortable with the format you're using, whether it's WebEx or Zoom or something else. There are features that you are going to want to use. So one feature is when people join the meeting, it's really important that you set the stage right away. So if it's a large group, I would recommend muting everybody and telling them that you are muting them. So you welcome them to the meeting, say, to cut back on feedback, I'm going to mute everybody on the call. I'll open up the lines later, something like that. If it's a small group with like 2 or 3 people, then there's no reason that you should have to mute. I think setting the stage by saying how you're going to run the meeting is important. So setting up, first of all, I'm going to have everyone on mute. I'm going to do a couple of introductions. Then we're going to unmute and do this, and then we're going to show slides on this. And so you kind of lay the format of what you're going to do, because for many people, meeting via video is new and they're not comfortable and they don't really know how it's going to work. So setting that stage right away is important. Also setting the stage that there are going to be bumps along the way. So especially when you're just getting started, saying, hey, this isn't going to be perfect. Especially if you're working from home. Some of us right now are working under difficult situations. You might see a kid in the background, or you might hear some noise. If you're having a bad hair day, it's okay. If you're eating your lunch, it's okay. If you're drinking, it's okay. Setting the stage so that everybody knows it doesn't have to be perfect and that you expect to have some bumps along the way. I also recommend, if you have a large group, when people are joining the call, that you mute them. And again, just say that you're muting them. And if you see them joining, you could say, hi, Jenny, I see that you've joined us. And that way, if you have a lot of people calling in on the phone, especially to a video-based meeting, they all tend to want to talk at the same time. So sometimes muting everybody on the phone is really important. I would use the chat feature heavily. So you should have a chat box that you can open as you're running the meeting, and encouraging people to put questions or thoughts into the chat box. You can also put links to websites, which is really helpful. So getting people used to using the chat box, you can say, we have a large group, we're going to mute everybody. Just please raise your hand if you have a question, or put your question in the chat box. That will really help you kind of keep control over the noise. If you are using the chat box and you have a really big group, I would definitely recommend that you have someone helping you who is kind of the meeting organizer. They can keep an eye on the chat box, answer back to people, bring questions to your attention. So you might want to do this with somebody else if you have a large group. Some of the other tips and tricks. So I'm working here looking at a computer. I'm looking at the camera on my computer. So this is actually above where I see the image. So this is something that's weird to get used to at first. You have to look at the camera on your computer rather than the computer. So like, for example, if I look at the computer right now, you can see it doesn't look like I'm making eye contact, right? So I have to look back at my camera so that you feel that I'm making eye contact with you. So when you have a large group of people, there's an option to look at kind of a grid view of all of their faces. So I would recommend you do that. And then even if you're looking at people's like this on the monitor, you want to go back up to that camera and make some good eye contact. These are a couple tips and tricks. I think another really good feature is to use the share button on the either WebEx or Zoom to illustrate what you're talking about, but not to leave a slide deck of all the time. There is a way, it's a little complicated to minimize that, but most people don't know how to do it. So what happens is if you put up a slide deck to share, they don't really see other faces anymore, they just see the slide deck. And then it's harder to kind of feel like you're in a group. So I would recommend using the slides and sharing it only when you're illustrating something. And then when you're done, take it off of the slides and just look at everybody's faces again. So that makes you feel like you're in a group. I find that if you're just showing slides and you're not seeing other people's faces, it's really easy to get zoned out. Okay, so one more tip today. I have a lot of tips, but one more tip is to have a backup. So inevitably, when you do these meetings, you know, your internet will go out, or I've even had my electricity go out once, or, you know, your phone doesn't work or something happens. So a couple of backups. Again, if you have somebody to help you, if you have a large group, have an assistant, and then that person is your backup. So if you drop off for some reason, your assistant can pick up while you're trying to get reconnected. That's a good strategy. Also, I definitely recommend having a backup internet connection. So like if you have a phone that you can hotspot off of as a backup in case something happens to your primary internet, that's also good practice. So basically just thinking ahead for what can go wrong and what you might do to work around that, because things obviously will go wrong. Anyway, these are just a couple tips. I hope they're helpful. And next time we'll talk a little bit more about the art of being virtual. Thanks.